is failing, and there is too much rubbish so that we are unable to work on the wall. The word of life.
Today's New Testament lesson comes from Romans chapter 8, verses 31 through 39. Please rise if able. What then are we to say about these things? If God is for us, who is against us? He who did not withhold his own Son, but gave him up for all of us, will he not with him also give us everything else? Who will bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is to condemn? It is Christ Jesus who died, yes, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed intercedes for us. Who will separate us from the love of Christ? Will hardship or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are being killed all day long. We are accounted as sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. you so much. It's such a beautiful song. My goodness. Let's just bow our heads for a moment and pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O God, my rock and my salvation. Amen. It's so good to be back in the church, isn't it? And to see real people. So, yeah, it's great. I must admit that I'm not really much of a fun person. I don't like a circus. So I don't go to a circus, I find it quite boring. I also don't really like to go to an amusement park, one of these theme parks. So if I'm not dragged there, I just don't go there. I'd rather go to a symphony concert. Isn't that very nerdy? But my friends, a few years ago, 3 of my friends decided that I need a little bit of education in fun. So they dragged me to Everland. So I said, okay, let's go. It might be a good experience. And on a beautiful autumn day, we went there. And it was quite fun. I really enjoyed going in there. It was big. If you've never been there, you should go. It was big, so we went in, and there were all kinds of wonderful things that I would categorize as fun. There were ice cream, all kinds of ice cream. And I love ice cream. Cotton candy. My goodness, it was big. And of course, I had my cotton candy. There were all kinds of rides and things, like the carousel and that kind of things, and I was on there and it was good. And then one of them suggested that the roller coaster is quite fun. Well, I didn't think so. But after a lot of deliberations, they got me in the queue for the roller coaster. I was looking at this thing, and I thought this is the furthest away from what I would categorize as fun as you could get. But not to be a spoil sport, I said, okay, fine, I'll try this thing. So the row was very, very long, and the closer we got, the more uneasy I felt. It's very uncomfortable. But I thought, fighting. I will do this. This is in the fighting category. And so we got on these little carts, 2-2, and I said, okay, right. And I think I prayed as well. I said, Lord, just give me mercy to get to the end of this thing. Because I'm not doing it for myself, I'm doing it for them. And so we got on this thing, and it started moving. And it was okay. It was not too bad, because it went on a sort of a slope, about maybe sort of 45-degree slope. And then suddenly it went up. And then at some point, when we bus, I think it fell down 30 meters. I don't know, but I was literally in hell. Can you just maybe not show this now? Later, please. Thank you. You're giving away what I want to get at. So, the rest of that whole journey was turns and falling and up and down, and it was absolutely horrible. So when we got at the end of this thing, I was quite in a traumatic state. I said to myself, never, but never again in my life. I need such fun. Let other people have that kind of fun, not me. Well, when we got off, my friends were laughing and they were joking, and they were going on about my reaction. Apparently it was also not very funny. My friend next to me was not impressed at all, because apparently I grabbed his arm during the whole ordeal, and he was full of blue spots. And he was sore because I grabbed him, and it was just not fun. So that was my ordeal with the roller coaster. Now, I had a choice going on this roller coaster. But you know, sometimes we don't have a choice, because life is full of roller coasters. And since last year, it's about a year now, the world has been on a roller coaster. And I know we don't want to talk about COVID-19. We are sick and tired of that. But I think we should talk about it. We should know where we are. And so if I think of what is happening during the last year and also now, I think of a roller coaster. And a ride that we didn't plan, a ride that we were actually bullied into. Now, it's very interesting if we look at what is really happening at this moment. The Washington State Department of Health, they issued a report that measures where we are at this state. It is actually a report, a sociological report of what is happening to people during this pandemic. And it's very interesting. They also have a forecast in this prediction of them in this study that they did. So maybe you can put it on now. You can see what's there. So what they say is that the first part of this journey, of this roller coaster that we've been in since last year, this first part is actually the time when there was this threat. There was this impending crisis. We heard all the news from Wuhan. We saw the images on television. And of course, in our minds, it was this uneasiness and uncomfortableness, this warning, this threat. And then the impact. It's here. And everybody was shocked. We had all the news how this virus is spreading all over. And this is what I call the moment of impact, a disaster. And then it spiked, it went up. But emotionally, it was a time of heroic deeds. And they call it the honeymoon phase. People band together to overcome what was perceived as a temporary setback. We all say to one another, maybe 6 months, maybe 7 months, things will go back to normal. And we were all psyched up for this thing. There's a researcher at the Seattle University, and she did also a lot of predictions and work on this. And she says, well, this is the time when there is cohesion, community cohesion, and it's at its highest. Optimism is also at its highest. And then after a while, mental resilience wanes. The virus is losing its newness. And then you get that dip. It's going down and fast. When we start to realize that there's a second wave and a third wave, and there are new strains all over the world, and we suddenly realize that this thing is not fun anymore. And we go down, down, down. And that is what she calls the time of disillusionment, or the phase of disillusionment. And it's usually this phase of disillusionment sets in when cortisol, that stress hormone that we all have, overwhelms the brain. Our brains are constantly scanning for threats. Ms. Margit explains. But if it goes on too long, and for us it was about 6 months that we constantly had this cortisol going in our minds, and sort of a mass cortisol in so many people. And after 6 months, people are tired. Tiredness sets in. They're tired and they cannot regulate their emotional responses very effectively. What then happens is that mental health bottoms out at 6 to 9 months. And then there's a rise in mental conditions. Anxiety, depression, suicide, drug overdose. Those things follow. It's interesting that COVID-19 had a bit of a different pathway than most other disasters they found. They say that with the pandemic, in contrast, social isolation has led to an increase in depression, anxiety. And people experience different levels of depression. But what they say is that there is a general tiredness, there's a burden on people, and it is as if that burden is too heavy. So the tempers get shorter. People have difficulty in focusing. People have difficulty in remembering details. And so you get all of this. That's part of this journey that we are on. And maybe we can recognize that. There are so many people that are in this state of not really depression, but a state of tiredness, exhaustion. And it's both physical and psychological. And I want to say spiritual too. In most disasters, they found that people generally return to their baseline for mental and emotional health after 6 to 9 months. But in this case, there's no end in sight. We are waiting for the vaccinations, and sort of our hope is on the vaccinations, and then we hear, no, but it can still get worse. And so we don't know when it will end. It is a long, long wait. Now, one way of dealing with something is to look it in the eyes and measure that. and see what it is. We can hide from this. We can keep ourselves very busy with other things, but at some point it will catch up to us. It will face us. Now, the question that I have is this for you and me: how to deal with this roller coaster? In the past few weeks, I spoke to many people. And the problem is that last year, COVID-19 was only figures, numbers. So many people to date, and then we hope it goes down, and we looked at numbers. And suddenly those numbers, since second half of last year, those numbers got names. And we realized that there are people that we know who got this. And lately, there are many people that we know who died. The numbers of people dying become the names of people we know. And that creates fear. And more cortisol is getting in our system released. So we ask the question, but we as Christians, what can we do? How can we deal with this? And during the week, I went to the life of Nehemiah. And I was wondering, who is there in the Bible that I can look up and look at his or her life? And there are many, many wonderful characters in the Bible. But the one that really caught my attention is Nehemiah. When I read this man's story, I get inspired. And I want to look into his life maybe for a long time for my own study, my own Bible study, my own study of the Word of God. But I want to share one thing with you this afternoon. How do you get through a roller coaster? Well, here in Nehemiah, I see this wonderful story of a man that heard about the ruins in Jerusalem. The wall of Jerusalem lay bare. It's in ruins. There's nothing left. There's just rubble all over the place. And he was touched by that. So he went to the king. And we know the story of the king that saw him, that he was depressed, that his face was sad. The king asked him, "Now, what is wrong?" And he told the king, and the king sent him. He said, "Go, do what you need to do." So he went to Jerusalem. And here in the fourth chapter, in the third chapter, fourth chapter, we see how he went about, and he, even in the night, and he inspected the walls of Jerusalem. And how he started to build it. He got himself a gang of visionaries to build up the walls. In this chapter that we read this afternoon, it's a wonderful chapter. You have to read it a few times. In this chapter, we see Nehemiah, when he looked at the walls, he saw built walls. He had a vision. And we see the contrast with a man with the name of Sanballat. Sanballat looked at the same things that Nehemiah looked at. And for him, it is okay to see rubble. He got so used to see rubble that is no hint in his mind that these rubble can become walls. But when Nehemiah looked at the rubble and at the broken walls, what he sees is this: broken things can be restored. On the one hand, you have this man that is going to make a difference. On the other hand, you see this man, Sanballat and Tobias, and they gang, because they were a gang. And they were chaos creators. And so, if I look at Nehemiah, the question comes into my mind: are you a difference maker or a chaos creator? Because in a crisis like this, you can see out. If you're in the open, wherever you work, wherever you find yourself in, you can see the Sanballats. You can see the chaos creators, people that look at this and it is negative, and it is as if the world is going to come to an end. And they even use Bible text. They preach it. On the other hand, you see people who are difference makers. And Nehemiah was one of them. Nehemiah was the one who went about the wall, and he had a vision. You see, a difference maker is a person who looks at things differently. If you want to create, or if you want to make a difference, you have to change the way that you look at things. He went about and he looked at all the rubble. It must have been quite a sight to see. It must have break his heart. But in his heart, he's a man of doing. He saw the possibilities. We can take all these broken stones and these broken bricks, and we can take all of that. And can you imagine how beautiful this wall will be? It will have the history of what we had, of this brokenness in it, but we build up this wall, and let's do what our hands find to do, and let's do it with all our might. That is the Nehemiah attitude. In the history, you also get those people that are difference makers and chaos creators. Interesting, I read the story of Igor Sikorsky. He was the first person to build a helicopter. But when he was 12 years old, his parents told him that competent authorities had already proved human flight impossible. They said to him, well, you have this dream of flying, but do you know what? It's impossible. Birds fly, humans don't do that. And he went on later in his life, and he built the first helicopter. In his American plant, he posted a sign: if you knew what I know. I read about the bumblebee. According to recognized tests, the bumblebee cannot fly because of the shape and weight of his body in relation to the total wing area. You know bumblebee, big body and small. So it says that the body in relation to the total wing area is too heavy. You see, the bumblebee doesn't know that. So he goes ahead and he flies anyway. There's a story, I don't think it's true, but it's a good story, about David and Goliath. And the myth goes on saying that apparently there was somebody of the guard or people around David who told him, David, you will never conquer Goliath. Look how big is the man. And look how small you are. David, just give up. Nothing will happen. And little David said to them, yes, look how big is Goliath. You cannot miss him. Brothers and sisters, we are on the roller coaster. And on this roller coaster, you don't need people like me who scream and fear that they're going to fall off at any moment, panic. You need someone who says, it's too grounded, it's too much fun. Let's go for it. You need a Nehemiah who can look at brokenness and see wholeness. We don't know exactly how this whole thing will play out. But we know there is a reconstruction phase as well. And thankfully, the people who study these things, they tell us, yes, there is. But the reconstruction is usually totally different from what it was. So there's a new future. And we can look at all the negativity, the possibility that we might get this virus, or that we might be affected by some way with this virus. And we can fear. We can listen to social media, or look at social media, and we can listen to the media, and we can just sit down and die. Or we can look at the broken walls, and we can say, it's too big to miss. Let's do it. And if you read this chapter, it says that Nehemiah did what was in front of him. He started to build. And he got a whole lot of people. And they start building right in front of them. Do what is in front of you and make a difference. And may God help us. Amen.
Arise if you are able to and sing the Lord's Prayer.
Receive the benediction and go in peace. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.